Welcome to Fashion Futures Podcast. It's your host, Camila Sanders, and this season we are discussing Africa. We're connecting with industry experts and individuals on the front lines to gain viable resources for your fashion journey. Together, we're working to take back fashion, shift power, shift economics, shift paradigms, and create a new sustainable, ethical fashion system. Take a listen and let's accelerate fashion forward. You did talk about innovations, and I would love to talk about technology and Africa. And you had mentioned like NFTs before, and you mentioned how the population growth in Africa and the amount of youth that are in Africa. And so, where do you see the digital future of Africa, technology in Africa? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my thoughts really are there are some basic challenges that Africa needs to overcome, like constant electricity, like data, affordable data, and um and even in some areas, just the right access to the right tools to kind of like smartphones and laptops to kind of use or tap into the digital future that we have. Like, how available are Oculuses for people? How are people going to be engaging with this technology, keeping it charged up and things like that? I think those basic problems need to be solved. So I gave an example. I like to give this example of a few years ago. I was at an African fintech event. I think it was about 2016 or around the time I was developing the global fashion marketplace and looking at pivot into sustainability and things like that. And there was a lot of people from like global banks and things like that, and they were doing like a think tank type event. And one of the case studies that they brought up was the mobile phone banking in Africa. I can't remember the specific country that it started in, but yeah, so they called it Ping It or something like that, and they used to send um transactions through the little Nokia phones or the little, they weren't smartphones, they were kind of like those 90s type phones. And yeah, so they innovated with what they had, and people, market traders and local people, were sending the currency to each other using the text message feature on the phone. And the banks were really impressed by this, and they were like, yeah, mobile banking, this is the future. This was I was when I was at this event, this is when people had to log in on the desktop to access the bank. So there wasn't really mobile apps for every bank and things like that. And that innovation really came from looking at what is going on in Africa. So what I would say for when it comes to Africa, that it's important that African people are looking at their problems in their own environment, and African people are solving African problems with African solutions. And I think those kind of innovations can actually serve the world. If Africa managed to solve their electricity problem in an innovative way, um, and their connectivity problem with innovations that are African centric, that can solve a lot of problems in terms of if they can do green energy and solve that problem. I've heard people talk about kinetic energy and people using that to kind of power their houses and stuff like that, or like charge their mobile phones if it's on a small scale and things like that. So yeah, there are solutions out there that are African focused, because African has its own unique problems. But from solving their own unique problems, they'll be able to solve a lot of problems that the world has got itself into. Because I think, coming from a Western lens, overdevelopment and industrialization leads to certain problems, certain solutions. The fact that Africa has not done the industrialized process means that they can look at things more organically and come up with kinetic energy solutions and things like that, which the West might have not considered, because they've got the power lines and the power grids and all that infrastructure. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but from my perspective, looking at the waste issue and looking at circularity and saying, this is a problem in Africa. We have all this waste coming into our country. How do we manage? How do we process it? How do we create a system that makes products out of this waste, sorts it and makes products out of this waste? That's the innovation, the entrepreneurship that Africans need to focus on when it comes to technology. That's my answer. I think they will develop their own technology based on the problems that they're solving in Africa. I don't think it's necessarily a jump to the metaverse straight away. I think there's a path there, but I think practically there are big fish to fry, so to speak, before Africa can really get on that journey.
I think that it's interesting where a lot of the creative ideals come from is really it's about solving problems, and a lot of times when you have everything handed to you, or access and things that a lot of the global north has, it's really hard to think of, okay, how exactly do we solve this problem? But when you are in the thick of it, right, and you need to innovate, like
Yeah.
you're forced to innovate, then that's where the creativity comes. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited,
Yeah,
just about this conversation.
yeah, there's so many stories like this that come out of Africa. I think I wish I knew the names. I should have written the names down before for the case studies before I mentioned them. But there was a young man in Africa that actually um he had some issues with not being able to continue school or schooling or something like that. So he actually went to the library and he needed to he basically created a windmill, basically looking at textbooks in the library and stuff like that. And it was able to power like 4 light bulbs in his house, and he was able to do studies at home. And then people around where he lives started coming to charge their phones and things like that at his house because he had constant electricity from this windmill. And yeah, so it was, I think, 5 years after he actually created that he actually got the opportunity to use actually a desktop computer and do Google research and things like that. So he basically got all his insights from going to the library and looking at textbooks. And there was like a local scrapyard or something where he got bits and bobs and built this windmill. And that's innovation, isn't it? That's using the tools and the resources that you have available to do what you need to do and get it done. And I think a lot of Africans do have that ability, and I think that's what Africa needs to be tapping into more and more. There's a lot of stories about African geniuses that have built tech or come out of a situation and innovated and created something that the world has been like, wow, how did you do that in your circumstances, in your situation with your limited resources? And I think that's really the energy that we need to be looking at when it comes to technology and innovation in Africa.
That's great. And it also talks to about the power of the mind of a youth, of youth, right? And just, I think probably at my age, I would think, oh, I can't do this. I have so many different limitations. But when you talk to someone that's younger, they're like, why can't I do this?
Yeah, yeah.
I can figure this out. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, and that
So
just speaks to the fact that Africa is a young nation, and it's going to be one of the young, or Nigeria specifically, is going to be one of the younger nations um, as it develops up until 2050. The population, I think it's already 50% under the age of 30, and that population is going to double. So there's going to be a lot of young people in Africa that are able and capable to look at the world from a different lens and say, we didn't create this, we didn't create this system. This is the system that works for us. This is the system that connects to our heritage. This is the system that connects to our land, and this solves the problems and gives us the resources that we need to build our future. So I think it looks positive, and I think